All right, guys, we're going to get a little bit more complicated than we did yesterday. What I want you to do while we're going into this, I want you to imagine the B car. A lot of you guys have got this B car down pat. You know what the coil binding is. You know how the B car is supposed to feel. With a new Gen 6 car, you can get that feeling somewhat that you have in the B car with this car. It's a lot more comfortable to drive, but make no bones about it, this car is hard to drive. Don't beat yourself up because you can't do what you can do in the B car with this car. Okay, it's just hard to drive. So it takes a whole lot more finesse, a whole lot more patience, and the biggest difference in this car and the B car is the front end. Okay, the rear end is about the same. You just can't be quite as aggressive. You can't run quite as big a spring package in this car as you will the B car, because you're going to need a little more rear grip as the fuel comes out of this car. Okay, but the biggest difference is what we're fixing to go into, and what I'll spend the majority of the time is trying to get the picture in your head that I have in my head of what bump stops do. Okay, all bump stops do in a general form is the same thing that a B car does. Is when the B car coil binds, it coil binds all the spring coils. That's what it means. All the coils and the springs combined to where it cannot be compressed anymore. In the A car, it coil binds, but it doesn't use the coils to do it. Okay, the A car comes down, and instead of coil binding the coils and the springs, it stops on that bump stop. It's the exact same principle as coil binding. It stops. It just doesn't use the springs to do it. The difference is, with a big thick piece of rubber, there's a little give. Now, how much give and how much stop you want in the travel of that spring is where you're going to run into the difficulty of setting the front end up of this A car. Okay, so let me get in here. Now, the biggest thing with this new car is you'll notice that right here there's no chain link. They made it's a lot easier now. It's all solid link. So 99% of the time you're going to be at a negative preload. Now, with this negative preload on the A car, and forgive me a little bit now because I'm just on the same plane as you guys are with this. I spent Monday and Tuesday the biggest part of all day. I didn't even go to work. I told my guys I was staying home. And I spent both days learning what each estimate of this thing does. Okay, so I'm finding that I'm liking a little less preload in this A car than I do my B car. I'm thinking that with drawing that thing down, you've got a little bit more travel in the front springs, but you've also got a little heavier car. So my Vegas set has about, I think it's about 35 to 40 negative preload in it. It's not drawing it quite as down as far, but the reason for that is how bumpy the track is too. So at a high speed track like what this one is right here is at Michigan, it may come back up to the B car, which is something I haven't even tested yet, but just out of experience, I would imagine the B car preload in a high speed track would probably be working best, because you're going to want to keep that front end sucked down as much as possible for speed. Remember what I told you, that preload's like that winch, bringing those springs down. Well, you want it to be as close to that bump stop as possible all the way around this racetrack, because there's not going to be a whole lot of weight transfer because of the speed that you're traveling into the corners with. You're already down there. So it's not going to need a lot of travel in the front end like at Vegas or at Charlotte, where you got that dip in that turn one. So there's no chain to worry about now. Everything else up here is the same. One hint I'll give you that I have found out, it's worked with every car I've ever used. You know, there was a lot of talk on the forums about how the fixed set was squirrely in the trial at Vegas. All you got to do is add some nose weight, and it'll take that out. So if you're ever got a little bit of an unsteady feeling, or if the car's feeling like it's just a little on edge and coming off a corner straightaways to where it's just a little uncomfortable, add a little nose weight to it. It'll stable that car up. You'll also feel a little more reaction time in the steering wheel, because it'll put some weight on that front end to where when you turn the car, there's enough weight to where it will turn that car at high speed. So don't be afraid to use a little bit of nose weight. I know rear nose weight or rear weight adds a little speed, but speed ain't gonna help you if you're in the wall. So add a little bit of nose weight to comfort it up a little bit. All right, the front end. What I'm gonna do here is, with this Michigan set, you'll notice that there's a 3 bump stop and a 4 bump stop in the front end, and there's a negative and a even shim. Basically what these bump stops do is it's a big piece of rubber on the shock shaft. The shock goes in, the shock is right here. The spring goes around the shock. Okay? Now that spring compresses and that shock slows the speed. So the spring is the rate of travel, how far it will travel on the front end, how far the front end will go up and down. That shock is how fast that front end will go up and down. So if you've got no shock bump in it at all, no compression, when it goes into the corner and weight comes down, it's going to come down like this. You put about half a bump in it, which is 15 right here, about half the car, which is a less aggressive shock. It's going to, instead of coming down like this, it's going to come down like this. So that rate of travel is what you've got to find out when you're timing the car going into the corner, is keeping that car going down to where right when it gets down, you're right about center corner. You're getting down in there and letting it stroll and then coming right back up. So that's what that shock, now the shocks I don't think are quite right yet. So play with them, you know, get a feel out of them. It's the same thing as anything else. When you make an adjustment on a right front shock, you're going to have to make an adjustment somewhere else, because any adjustment you make affects an adjustment somewhere else in the car. So just, you can play with that bump with these bump stops. But what that bump stop does is when the spring compresses, it's a big piece of rubber that is on the shaft of the shock, basically. And the higher the number of this bump stop, which will go all the way to 16 and all the way to none, okay? The higher the number, the bigger that piece of rubber is. The higher the number, the less that front spring will travel. So what you're doing is finding the travel you want in this front spring and then controlling that amount of travel with how much bump stop you put in it. So like the B car yesterday, when you were wanting that to find that spring deflection, to find how much travel you had in the front spring, well, with this you're going to want more travel because you're not compressing the spring, right? So now you're going to want more travel because the travel is going to come down and stop on the bump stop instead of coming all the way down and stopping on the coils. So now you want more travel because you're having less travel to go to get down to the splitter. So now with the splitter on the B car and the spring right here and the splitter right here with the B car, when it compresses and the splitter gets right just on top of the pavement and stops on the coils, with this one, with the A car, the splitter's right here. So now you've got this much travel. If you come to where it stops on the bump stop, you've got to get a little more travel to get to the top of that bump stop and get that splitter on the ground. Okay, that's all that bump stop is. One thing that I'd done was I made it a whole lot more complicated than it actually was until I talked to, I sat and picked brains of Jared Crawford, Dustin Montgomery, Tyler Hudson, John Adams, those guys, those DWC drivers, and just said, okay, now when this happens, what does this do? When that happens, what does this do? And it finally clicked on me Monday exactly the mental image I needed for these bump stops. All it is a piece of rubber that stops the front spring from coil binding. Basically, that's all it is. Now, all you have to do now is find out how much travel you want in that front spring to rest on that bump stop the same way you would with the B car, to when the coils bind and you're right on top of the racetrack going in the corner. With this one, you want to rest where the coils stop on the bump stop and right on top of the track in the corner. So you've got a whole lot more detailed travel with this one than you do the B car. The B car is a little easier. All you got to do is figure out how much travel you got with your spring deflection here. Okay, you get it up around 320, you know it's going to coil bind about right going into the corner. It may be a 325, it may be a 330 to a 457. With this car, you're going to get in the 250s, 220s, 280s, something like that, because you're going to need that extra travel because it's going to stop on top of the stop instead of going all the way down and coil binding. All right. Now the bump stops are the piece of rubber that stops the spring from going all the way to bind the coils. The packers is how far up the bump stops are. So basically what these packers do is when you have found the amount of bump stop you want where that car is going into the corner and sitting down on that bump stop, now you've got a 5 bump stop in it and it sits down on it and it's not quite getting to the track and it's pushing up a little bit on it. It's a little tight. You can put a 4 bump stop in it, and when you go in, the car is it's digging a little too much. It's wanting to, it's feeling like the coils are binding just a little too quick, and it's wanting to jerk on you. If you've driven this A car, you'll notice sometimes when you go in the corner, this thing really wants to turn on you. All right, that's what this packer's for. When you've found that spot in that bump stop that you've got a good spot and you can't quite find it between a 5 and a 4, so to speak, you can use this packer and put it at a .063, and that takes that 4 bump stop to almost like a 4.2. It lifts that bump stop up just a hair. So now when that spring comes down, it don't go all the way down to the 4 number bump stop. It goes to a number of 4.2, so to speak, bump stop. If that's still just a little bit too squirrely, you can go up 1 more. Raise it up just a hair more. So what that packer does is fine-tune that bump stop. That's all it is. It's just lifting that bump stop up and down on the shaft, and the number of the bump stop is how big it is on the shaft. Everybody with me? Oh man, that was easier than I thought it'd be. Now, same way as going below, you can also bring that bump stop down to where when it gets to the bump stop, it will coil bind the springs more and then gets to the bump stop, which you will use. Matter of fact, my Vegas set that I raced with Greg and those guys, I'm running, oh God, let me see if I can remember. I'm running I think I'm running a 3 on the right, a 4 on the left, and I'm running a negative 63 on my shim and a positive 63 on the packer on the left. So basically what I'm doing with my Vegas set is I'm wanting to get it to go into the corner, and you know how the track is angled. When you go into the corner, there's the angle of the corner, all right, is like this at Vegas. What I'm trying to do is when my car is flat on the straightaway, when it goes into this corner, I don't want that front end, that left front up or the right front up. When it goes in and sits down, I want it to sit down at the same angle that the plane of the track is. Okay, so that's the reason why I've got this a little cocked up on the left side, because it's got to come down. When it comes down and travels, it's going to come down and sit down on it. So I don't want it to be too high to where it keeps that left front up, but I want it to be level, because there's a little more room down here than there is right here. It's a little closer over here. Okay, so I'm going to have a little less bump stop over here because I want the car to come down to it. All right, when the car goes in the corner and the splitter sits down on the ground, I want it to be level with the way the plane of the track is. So that's why sometimes you'll kind of cock it up a little bit on the left side, because there's a little more room on the bottom of the car than there is at the top of the car. So I believe my Vegas has done this. What I wound up running with was with a 3 on the right, a 4 on the left, and then I dropped that 3 on the right just a hair, and then I brought that 4 on the left with a little bit thicker bump stop up just a hair. And what that done was kept me from coil binding that left front spring. Remember I told you in the B car yesterday, when that left front spring gathers, it will turn the car this way. In this A car, that is the last thing in the world you want, because it's already wanting to come around when you're getting on that throttle. So using that bump stop to soften that left front up and to keep it kind of riding when you're getting into the throttle will get you that good smooth transition from throttle to exit, which with this car is very important. Okay, so that's basically what the bump stops are. Is the bump stop is how far the spring will travel to hit it, and then the packer is how far up the bump stop is. So that's just a fine tune of the bump stop. Same way the shocks are to springs. When you get your springs set, you can use these shocks to fine tune how much that spring works. Same with the bump stops. That bump stop is there to set like a spring. That packer is like that shock. It will fine tune exactly where that rate of travel stops on that bump stop. And the only way to find that out is to get out there and run it and say, okay, this is what this bump stop feels like. Go out there and put you another one in it, see what it feels like. And you do that a little bit, you'll start finding some different stuff. I think Jared, see if I can remember, I think Jared's running, I think his right front bump stop's at 11.
That's what I was going to ask. I've never seen them higher than about 5. I don't know if they're not that high.
Yeah, I think Jared's Vegas set, I think his right front bump stop's 11. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it is. But when Dustin and the other guys drove my Vegas set, they liked it. They said, man, I can work with this. But when Jared drove it, he said, dude, I'm spinning out on entry. He could, every time he went in, the thing turned around on him. So it's all driver feel. Just the way Jared goes in that corner is so much different than the way we were going in with it, that he needs that extra bump stop to stop that travel, to keep him from digging and turning around so he could ride that corner around. But Jared's also turning low 6s. All I'm turning is high 7s. So I'm not going to say what he's doing wrong. So now that right there is the difference in the A car and the B car. Okay. Now the front toe, you'll notice that we don't have that front toe up here anymore, which would toe out or toe in the front tires the same. This one's a whole lot better. What this is how much the right front and the left front tire works to turn the car. That's basically what it is. And you'll always want that left front tire to work a little harder to turn the car, because it's the one that has the less weight on it. So you want it to try to work as hard as possible to turn the car. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to run a 2 and a 0 at speed tracks, a 2 and a 1 at flat tracks and short tracks, or flat tracks and intermediates. I don't like getting much higher than that 2. That 2 toe out or toe in there for the tires, because the more toe you put in it, you're scrubbing off a little speed, but more importantly is you're tearing that tire up. The more you tow it to get it to work, the more you're putting load on that tire. So a 2 on that left front, to get it to work a little bit harder than the right front tire, because the right front's doing all the work anyway when the weight transfers over to the right side. So you don't really need the toe to cheat that right front tire to get it to work. That left front tire, you want to cheat it a little bit to get it to work more. So that's all that toe is right there. That's a very simple thing, is getting that toe, 2 on the left. You'll usually wind up with a 2 on the left, a 0 or a 1 on the right. I use a 0 most of the time, like at Michigan. The 1.5 miles will probably be a 0. Depending on how the car's handled, I may put a 1 in it. But then when you get to like Phoenix, New Hampshire, places like that, you'll probably want to put that 1 in it, just to keep the car rotating through the center of tighter corners. See what I'm saying? Do what? Oh, both of them will be negative.
So you'll end up with toe out.
Yeah, I'll bring this one down to a. No, I take it back. Let me see here. No, it'll be a positive. I'm sorry, you're right.
Both tires pointed left.
Yes. Okay. There you go. Both tires pointed left. It just depends on how much you want to cheat them. Which all that is a little cheater, is to get that left front to cheat a little bit. Now the rear toe, the difference in this car too is your rear cambers you have more of now. So now with the B car, all you got to worry about is these front cambers. When you get to this tire and look at your tire pressures or your tire temps, With the B car, all you got to work on is the cambers of them front tires, because the cambers of the rear tires, all you're using that for is grip. On my B car, I'll max out the right rear camber, and I'll run that left rear camber a 1.5 or a 1.6 about every racetrack I go. Just because I like that left rear grip. Okay. Now, on the A car, it's a little different animal, because you've now got more rear camber. You can actually camber these rear tires to what they're supposed to be. So now when you're doing your 10 to 15 lap runs and you look at your front cambers and you're getting, after about 12 to 15 laps, you're getting this right front about as even across the temperatures as possible, even to 5 degrees. You're getting this left front about 5 to 10 degrees at most on the left front. The right rear, you're going to start wanting to get a little bit as even as possible on both rear tires. You want as much contact patch on the pavement with the rear tires as possible. And how you know you've got as much tire on the pavement as possible is the temperatures across the rear tire. Yes, I know the temperatures are not exactly right, but they are close as far as the cambers are concerned. What is not right is the center temperatures as far as pressures are concerned. Don't adjust pressures to center temps. Use 2 and 2K3, we could look at those center temps. And if they wasn't even across, we either had too much or too little air pressure. We could adjust our pressures to that. You can't do it here yet. That's coming, I would imagine. But right now, the only thing you need to worry about these center temps is right front to right rear. If you can keep them as close as possible to each other, the car's balanced. One thing I have found out with this A car, don't work too hard on making the car feel balanced over the course of the run. This car is naturally going to loosen up. It's not going to tighten up. 9 times out of 10, you're going to fight this car being loose coming off the corner when the fuel load gets light. So having this car be a little bit tight with a little bit more right front wear is not necessarily a bad thing in this car, especially for handling. It's the set that I run at Vegas with Greg and them. I was about an 8% more wear on the right front than I was the right rear. But that meant I had more right rear grip and I could get off the corners quicker. So that's another difference in this car and the B car. The B car, you want it to be as much as possible or maybe a little bit more right rear wear. With this car, having a little bit more right front wear is not necessarily a bad thing. But after a 10 or 12 lap run, you'll want them pretty close. Okay, within 1% of each other one way or the other. But that's the only thing you'll use those center temperatures right here for, is just to measure how balanced the car is on the right side through the corner. That's what them center temps will tell you right here. Now your cambers are pretty close. You're going to get your cambers about right. It's just now you got to start working on rear cambers. Because now you've got enough camber, you can put enough camber in these rear tires to actually get the rear tire temperature spreads even. One thing I have found out, that a front camber change of, for example, a 2.5 on the right front to a 2.0, that'll get you closer to even across the front. That kind of change on the rear camber is way too much. That rear camber is a whole lot more sensitive. So only make those rear camber changes one number at a time. If you're finding out that your right rear camber it's rolling over on the right rear and the outside is hotter than the inside of the right rear tire, so you need to have a little bit more camber in it. So a 2.6 with an outside temperature that's hotter than an inside temperature, you'll want to go to a 2.7, go run it again. So because that 2.7 is going to be a pretty big adjustment on that rear tire. Just for an example, of course. And it doesn't matter what these two numbers are, as long as those temperatures on those rear tires are even across, because you're getting as much contact patch of the rear tires as you can possibly get. Because that's the difference between the rear and the front. The rear, you want all the tires sitting on the ground as much as possible. The front, you want it leaning a little bit to help the car turn. You want it to cheat because the front's rolling over more. So that's the reason why there's more lean on those front tires than there are on those rears. But basically that is all that's different between the A car and the B car. Yeah, pressures are not adjusted in temperatures. Trust me, I've tried. Because your center temperatures are going to be more than they're supposed to be. Those center temps are going to show you you've got way too much tire pressure every time, no matter what happens. You can drop those pressures to the minimum that NASCAR requires, and you're still going to be 10 degrees hotter in the center of the tire.
So how are you adjusting your tire pressure?
Feel.
On feel?
All feel.
Kind of like a small spring adjustment?
Exactly right. Exactly right. I'm using tire stagger like I would rear spring stagger. I'm using, if the car's sliding up on me, I'm using a little less pressures. Left side pressures will make the car feel like it's gripping on the left side on the inside of the corner. All right, if I feel like I'm skating up, I'm going to drop the right side pressures a little bit to get it to grab a little more. It takes a little pressure. It takes a little, but other than that, it just takes a little practice finding out where you want it, but you're going to sacrifice speed. The less pressure you got, the more drag you got. Huh?
With less pressure, more drag, right?
Yep. Less pressure, more drag.
So you want to try to run as much as you can to keep a good tire patch in your cambers. And
you want to run as much pressure as your ego will allow.
Hey Greg, you can run it to the top, baby.
I mean, if your biggest goal when you get into those practice sessions, when you get into those servers, those practice servers, if you're just not satisfied unless your name's at the top of that leaderboard, by George, you pump them pressures up, buddy, and you go trucking.